Good luck to the lucky winner who is going to win a copy of this book. Tiankai, no, I'm sorry if I'm pronouncing your name incorrectly. I've done it a few times.
No, it's all good. No, Tiankai is correct. All good.
So how we pick a winner, either we'll get the class to raise their hand and you pick a number between 1 and 17. And then that person with that number, their raised hand, will win a copy. Or the question that made you think the most, you can make that person the prize. So those are the two options. I know the hands is usually what we go for. So up to you and how you would like to
Let's do the hands one. I like that one. That's
hands,
random enough.
Perfect. Yeah. Love that. And then, as you know,
let's all put our hands up.
I saw a hand already coming.
All the hands raised all the time. Yeah.
Yes. And then are you happy with us raising our hands during the presentation and interrupting you with questions? Or would you like to keep it to the end?
I think keep it to the end simply because the question might be answered on the slides afterwards immediately. So I think if we just keep the flow going and then I'll take questions at the very end, that would be best.
Okay, perfect. So thank you for clarifying. And then I'm going to hand it over to Howard to introduce you and then we can start. Thank you all so much. Enjoy the webinar.
Great, Debs. Thank you so much. And yeah, I think Debbie said most of what I know about your journey, and it comes with great respect from Steve Hoberman. So you've really got a supporter in there in terms of the book that you produce. So we look forward to it, and I'd just love to introduce you to the community. They really enjoy listening to some of the sessions from the authors. So we're very proud to have you and privileged to have you with us. I'm not sure if you'd like to share that YouTube, or would you get to it a little bit later? I thought it was quite interesting.
I mean, I have another music video at the end of my presentation that was anyway I will share. Spoiler alert, but we will get there. Yeah.
Okay, great. We had Sia rocking there on the other YouTube, so we thought we had a good impact there. Maybe we could keep going.
Yeah, sure. Sounds good.
Great. All yours, Tia.
Okay, sounds good. I'm just gonna share my screen. I hope you can see it.
We can see it.
Yes. Yeah.
Perfect. Then let's go. So thank you very much for the invitation to Howard and Debbie for letting me be part of this webinar series. And I'm very excited to talk to you all about a topic that's very close to my heart, which is the human side of AI. And the reason why I'm so passionate about the human side of AI is because I realize, even just in the recent projects that I'm part of that is around AI, that the biggest factors of failure and the biggest reasons for things not working in AI is actually rooted in human factors, right? It's always about either people not being able to align with each other, not being able to collaborate with each other, not speaking the same language and meaning different things when they talk about the same words, making thereby bad decisions and decisions that don't really include everyone's feedback. And all those things finally leading to AI not actually generating value, maybe even destruct things afterwards, and things basically breaking afterwards. And this is not something that is just new and specific to AI, right? I think in every, I would say, big digital transformation that we had, might it be cloud transformation or data transformation in recent years, it has always been the same problems. I just feel like that for AI, maybe this time around, we can avoid making the bad experiences first, and we start doing things right from the beginning, and we don't have to wait until we do really bad things until we learn from them this time around. But let's first start with a quick introduction of myself. I know a lot of things have been already now being introductory for me. Maybe just do a very brief one about myself. I currently work as a director for data and AI strategy at ThoughtWorks. That is a consultancy that focuses on different solutions, bespoke solutions for data and AI and tech generally. I'm also involved in the Dharma community. So I'm actually the vice president for Dharma Germany, so the German chapter of Dharma International, where we're also basically supporting the German-speaking community and having the data management professionals coming together. I also was lucky enough to be a TEDx speaker about AI, and I gave a talk about how human values need to drive AI 2 years ago. A lot of it that also flew basically into the book that I was writing. And I turned my passion for the human side of data and AI into writing not one, but 2 books. Last year, it was Humanizing Data Strategy that I released. And now this year, the one that I'm talking about to you all is Humanizing AI Strategy. And I sometimes use my musical talents also to make data and AI a bit more approachable. For example, I wrote 2 rap songs, actually. One is called Digital Analytics Anthem, and one is Governance of Data. But I'm not actually a rapper, but so you're going to see some music later on.
Sorry, I'm going to try to turn that down.
Sorry, I've muted her.
Yeah, all good. Yeah, I like to basically make data and AI more approachable and fun through some music. And there will be one example later on as well about that, just to actually close the session and spread some joy about it as well. So let's get started and look at the bigger picture first, right? Because when we look at the state of AI currently in the world, then it looks like and feels like that AI is really everywhere. But we also see a lot of hurdles, challenges, and failures around it, right? So just looking at this, right? EU enterprise adopting AI grew from 8% to 13% year on year between 24 and 25. 34 million AI generated pictures are daily happening and around the world, and it's getting more and more as well. The tech giants are investing $320 billion into AI development in the new upcoming years to actually make it work. There's 87%, on the other hand, of AI projects never making it into production. Also, 81% of workers still not actually use AI tools, and only 4% of companies actually are creating substantial value with AI. So the reason to ask ourselves is, why actually is that the case, right? Why is it that everyone's investing in it and everyone's doing it, but somehow we still see the other way around, where it's not adopted, it's not actually generating value, and it's not actually moving the needle as much as we think it is? And I think, as mentioned before, the reason for it is really a lot of human factors that we look at it, right? So really, simply said, and I think all of these things might sound familiar, right? First of all, it's a topic of competence, right? So really, do we even understand how AI works? Do we know what the limitations and the opportunities of AI are? We don't really have accountability on it, right? I know that AI governance was just actually on your agenda in the next events. That is a hot topic because we learned from data as well that if you don't have the right accountability, then no one is accountable for it. And that leads to certain problems all over. And that happens with AI applications for sure. We have a lot of ineffective collaboration because everyone is driven by excitement and by their isolated kind of preferences of what they want to do with AI, but not really working together. But that is the most important part of doing it. We have unevenly distributed information about it, right? Of who is working on what and how we work on certain things, meaning everyone creates their own little bubble of how they work with AI. And all of that is driven by bad decisions or leading to bad decisions, right? Of finally making decisions, not considering all of the consequences or all of the context that exists, and thereby not making the right choices around AI. And that means that we actually need to be more human-centered, and we need to actually look at how we can make an AI strategy and operationalize an AI strategy with human centricity in mind. And this is really where, when I think about human centricity, it breaks down into 3 factors, right? It's about mindset, meaning people should want to do the right things, and they want to actually follow a certain path of what AI is the right way to do. It's about skill set, right? So being able to do things right, and then being able to actually fulfill the tasks that are needed. And then all that also leading into behavior. Finally, basically turning mindset and skill set into actions and doing right things actually the right way. So that means that we'd actually need an AI strategy that is all of these aspects in its core. And before we talk about actually what human centricity in an AI strategy actually means, let's talk about what an AI strategy even is. Because when I looked into what an AI strategy is, and I tried to find the one definition that is adopted by everyone, I realized there really isn't one standard definition of what an AI strategy is. Meaning I looked into all of the different ways of how you would describe an AI strategy, and I kind of chose the best of all of those, right, and brought it all together. Right. So this is basically the definition I like to use, which is an AI strategy is a long-term plan that defines the people, process, and technologies to create, process, and use AI to intentionally drive value in a meaningful, secure, and transparent way. And the reason why I enjoy this definition is because it implies 3 things, right? One is it's about the entire AI lifecycle, right? Meaning all AI stakeholders need to be a part of it. So everyone that is basically creating data that AI models are learning from, or everyone who's actually creating AI models. Then you have the ones that are running the AI models and the AI platforms and the technology that you have. And you have the ones that are actually using the AI models and applications and actually everything they do, right? And only by looking at the entire life cycle, you can consider how to do things right, because otherwise it's always very one-sided towards bias towards one specific group of people. Then the second one is because it's value driven, right? It's about driving value. And that means that it needs to be strongly aligned with business goals, right? It's not about only having the newest model and the newest applications and the hottest new GPT, but it's about what actually drives the best value in a stable and sustainable way for your business. That is the most important. And that is why a value driven is a really important key criteria to be in an AI strategy. And finally, we need to consider human perception as well and subjectivity, meaning because words like meaningful or secure or transparent are always subjective, right? I can see something as transparent while you don't think it's actually that transparent. Someone else doesn't even know it's there, so they think it's not transparent at all. So we need to all agree actually on what these words mean to finally move forward and then drive work in the same direction. Otherwise, we're just throwing words around with everyone meaning different things by using the same words. So moving along then to what actually humanizing an AI strategy means, it's the framework that I come up with, which is the framework of the 5 C's. And the 5 C's actually are rooted in human traits and human values itself and shouldn't sound that groundbreaking, simply because in the end, it should be all intuitive, right? Human-centric means that we are all human beings, right? So being human-centric shouldn't actually be that hard. So basically, it's more about having a device of a framework and a structured approach to actually just remind ourselves what human-centricity in the context of AI actually means. And the 5 C's are competence, collaboration, communication, creativity, and conscience. Competence really is about AI literacy that's tailored to different roles, right? It's about having confidence without the overconfidence in relation to the skill set and the knowledge that we have. It's about knowing when to trust or question AI and having a healthy relationship as well towards when to apply your critical thinking and when you can actually delegate it and let AI do things autonomously. And it's about how to define human in the loop in the right way, right? Meaning having the right human at the right time for oversight and not overdoing it or underdoing it, because all of those come with a certain risk. Collaboration, really, it's about co-creation over coordination, right? So human-to-human collaboration on AI topics means we should co-create AI applications and AI initiatives, not just coordinate isolatedly what we do. It's about having federated governance because we want to make sure that we let business leading AI initiatives, and thereby we need to actually federate rather than centralize everything. It's about defining the right human and AI relationships and thereby deriving the right ways of interaction models we have with AI, especially when we get to the part of AI agents, right? It should be all cross-functional by default, and we should actually follow the pain to actually have impact, right? Because in the end, we should apply AI to solve problems and not just do because it's fun to do it. Then we have communication, right, which is about translating complexity into different stories, having different narratives that are about audience and understanding them of what they see as the value. It's also about semantic clarity. It's about having transparency on different touch points. And it's about also in the age of LLMs and chatbots that we have a certain voice authenticity, and we need to avoid the sameness when we actually train and operate chatbots and LLMs interacting specifically with employees or with customers, for example. Creativity really is, in the age of AI, very interesting because it's about the relationship between Gen AI and human beings, right? Like, where is human creativity? What is AI-generated creativity? So how do we actually find the balance between original human thought, which is more disruptive, between AI, which is more refining it, right? How can we see prompting then as a creative discipline? How can we have space for experimentation, right? And how can we balance incremental versus disruptive innovation, for example? And lastly, we have conscience, which is about having ethics by design and not only as a review, right? Not only having audits about ethics all the time coming in, but somehow building guardrails in by design. So it's easy to be ethical and hard to be not ethical, right? Then it's about accountability as well. It's about detecting bias. It's about measuring trust and psychological safety, sustainability, and keeping the moral compass actually in human hands, because the moral compass is something that we as human beings uniquely have, and best that AI can do is imitate it, but not really have it as we have as human beings. So in the next pages, I'm going to just give you a little bit more details on all of these 5 C's, right? And give you some examples how like in action and in practice. So ideally, it gives you maybe some inspiration how you can apply it into day-to-day as well. So let's start with competence, right? And we were going to talk about AI literacy itself. And with AI literacy, I think it has been, same as data literacy, used so much now in the recent year or so that it feels overwhelming, right? What does even AI literacy mean? Do I have to understand everything about all of the things in AI? How is that even possible if every day there are so many new things about AI to learn, right? And I think we need to just be clear that not everyone needs to know everything about AI, right? Depending on what your job is and depending on what your day-to-day looks like and tasks, you need to only understand the part that actually is relevant to AI and maybe a little bit more, but really that is the part that you should really take care of what it means to engage with AI. And there's this AI literacy framework that's, I think, funded by the European Union as well. That is, I think, very nicely putting into 4 buckets of what the different interaction models with AI actually are, which are engaging with AI, creating with AI, managing AI, and designing AI. Right. And if we look at what that actually means and we break it down into different roles, then we realize that certain roles fit in more to specific of those buckets of AI rather than others. And that also then comes with specific topics that need to be learned, but the other ones are not as important to learn than maybe the one that you're in there. So for example, engaging with AI is very relevant when, for example, a marketing team lead needs to use CRM tools that are AI powered more confidently. Right? Creating AI might be a customer service agent that actually is using generative AI to summarize tickets. Right? Managing AI is, for example, a compliance officer that ensures a responsible auditable usage of AI. And designing AI might be actually a machine learning engineer building AI models and evaluating user experience. And only when it comes to then specific roles that are across our everything, for example, executive leadership, that then needs to understand a smaller part of all of those 4 buckets, like executive leadership, when they set directions, ensure alignment, managing risk, and guiding innovation culture. This is really key then to look into all of them. But we can break down and identify in your specific organization and in your environment what those different types of interactions with AI actually are, and then define maybe even upskilling ways and curriculums about these different interaction nodes to then teach and let people be upskilled in specific ways. So AI literacy actually is then tailored more to the specific roles and less about making everyone voluntarily learn everything, because on their own, I think they're not going to be able to identify specifically what is most important for them. And then we go to competence, right? Competence is really about also human in the loop, right? I mentioned before human in the loop. What does it even mean? I think this is one of those words that happened also a lot in automation in the past, right? And I always talk about human in the loop means actually about the right person at the right time, right? It's not about having more human beings all in the loop. It's also not about having as little human beings as possible in the loop. It's about finding exactly the right balance, how to do it. Right. And in a way, it's basically all about when to actually define the right points when human beings need to intervene in things. Right. So if we roughly think about, for example, an AI process, right, and an automated process that is AI powered, and if something happens there, then the first step we need to actually look into is a trigger point. So when is, based on a certain rule, a spot or like an incident where a human review is mandatory, right? So that could, for example, be when during a fraud detection AI process, a transaction is flagged with a high risk score, right? So suddenly the score is above a certain threshold. So that means, okay, please, human being, you need to review this. We need a human judgment about if this process and this transaction should go through or not, right? Then that leads to the decision node, right? This decision node means it's about a human reviewer that then judges actually based on the context they have. It might not always be the same context. It might be also based on just human experience as well, that they need to make a judgment. Where, for example, in this example, a fraud analyst checks the contextual customer infos and then makes a judgment if this pursues or not. And if that turns out to be something that even the human reviewer cannot actually decide on their own, right? And they need actually additional expertise to make that judgment, then that is called and defined as an escalation path, right? So meaning that specific cases then require the right expertise. For example, in this example, that a compliance teams then needs to check because the customer address has been flagged as suspicious. So maybe some illegal things are happening there, and the compliance team would have more information about what needs to happen actually to do that. And no matter what, then there's also a fallback mechanism, right? So if that AI process is paused for that specific transaction, right, something needs to happen alternatively to actually then make sure that the process still runs just on a backup solution, right? And that could, for example, be that in this case, while the decision node is happening and the escalation path is happening, that a customer is asked to purchase in alternative ways and not do it specifically only via online only, but maybe through a different way, for example, through brick and mortar. In all of the things, traceability is really important, right? Because then based on the traceability and basically recording and documenting all of the things that were happening, right? How the trigger point was dealt with, how the decision node was basically implemented and what was decided there, what escalation path was taken, and how the fallback mechanism fell into place or not. When these things all need to be recorded and processed, and then the final outcome, actually what is then decided with a transaction, needs to be recorded too. Because in the end, that's about having transparency of when certain decisions have been made. It's about learning, not only for human beings, but also for an AI process and a future automation to learn from how human decisions were made. And then also about compliance, right? Because in certain ways, you need to stop them and make sure you're not doing anything illegal or you're not supporting anything illegal. And then having the right person at the right time is really key here. And that is what I mean by basically having a defined way of looking at it, right? It's not about just thinking generally, is it 1, 2, or 3 people in the loop? It's about defining when it's the right person at the right time in the loop. And basically having this being the starting point of trigger points and expertise that is needed, it can be a much more balanced approach of how to actually define human in the loop in the right way. Cool. And then we talk about career path, right? And I think this is really about the whole narrative that AI is going to take everyone's jobs, right? Because in a way, I like to frame it much more positively, because AI actually should push us to be more human, because we are offloading all of the certain tasks that are routine and actually very much mechanical to machines, right? But that also means that the skills we need to have and the new roles that are going to exist are then evolved from what is currently there into more that are AI adjacent, right? So I wouldn't say that jobs are going to be replaced, but they are going to evolve. And that means there might be new roles coming up, right? And these are just a few examples of roles that I see now coming up more and more. And I'm assuming that a lot of more of those will come up. So for example, there's going to be a lot more AI product managers, right? Simply said, we had data products now as the new standard in the data world. I think product thinking will apply to AI very quickly too. And it's just a matter of time until we talk about AI products as well. And thereby we need to understand technology and the human impact it has, right? It's about also then having AI trainers, right? Because all of that training of AI models already is very difficult nowadays and very resource heavy, I would say. So if we start creating dedicated roles for it, then we actually can help basically bridge the subject matter expertise to also specific AI models. They are also then able to fine tune AI models and give instructions to AI models instead of letting it only be done on the side by others. Of course, then we also need AI ethics leads, right? Those people that ensure that we're doing the right thing with it and that we are actually not doing anything illegal or anything that might be bad for humanity, right? So those need to also exist, meaning they're the ones then helping to design responsible AI systems. And lastly, we have AI translators, right? Those that actually bridge between business and tech needs. I think in the data world, those often have been data analysts or data architects, for example. But now in the new world, we need a similar thinking and a similar kind of skill set also for AI. And that leads to the next point of collaboration, right? So what is actually the right way to work together on AI projects? And what I'm trying to basically address here is that we always have that tension field between transactions and coordination. What I mean by that is that often transaction means you have one team serving the other team, right? As in, I need something from you. Can you please do it for me? And then basically we're done, right? So it's like very transactional. Typically, we talk about service centers and these kind of things about basically one department serving the other departments. And on the other hand, you have coordination, right? Which is basically all of the teams are kind of equal, but all they do is talk to each other about what they're doing, but they're still very much isolated and have their own agendas. So they don't really actually work in the same direction. It's just nice to know what the others are working on, basically, right? And either one also, of course, leads to a lot of risk and a lot of complaints as well, right? So for the transaction, it's always easy to complain about the ones that delivering for you, or always complaining about the customers not knowing what they want, right? I think we all can relate to this kind of conversations. So having that transactional relationship is not really helpful there. Even for the coordination, as I mentioned before, it's just letting each other know what they're working on, but it's not really leading to any collaboration or doing something together. But it sounds like we're in touch, so everything is going well, but it's not really driving any collaborative value. And no matter how you do it and how much you want to kind of drive it, because there's always a reason to complain, I think the key lies in the mindset itself and not necessarily only in the operating model itself, right? Because what I'm trying to advocate for is a co-creative mindset, right? Having co-creation as a mindset and not only transaction or coordination, because it implies actually, again, three different things of what it means to create something together. First, there's a shared goal and a purpose, right? So it's not about my goal versus your goal versus their goal. It's actually, we have one common goal. Let's address it together and let's find a way to get there to that common goal. Then we have clear contributions because different teams have different expertises and different mandates to do it, right? Typically, you have a data team, you have an IT team, you have a business team, you might have a AI engineer team. All of them contribute different things to an AI project, for example. And lastly, you have the strong commitment, right? Formalized commitment, meaning actually this put into OKRs or any kind of roadmaps that are there, and different teams take those objectives that are shared into their planning, and the people are actually dedicating formally their time to work on these certain topics. And then it doesn't really matter how you are set up as like centralized, hub and spoke, decentralized, whatever operating model you have, as long as you have a co-creative mindset, I think there's always a way then to find a solution. And instead of them only dwelling on the problems, you might actually want to find solutions quicker because you have actually that co-creative mindset. And that also is one way to also look into how governance should work, right? And in a way, basically AI governance should work by directly thinking about a federated model. And the reason why I'm thinking a federated model from the very beginning is making sense is because we need to now have a business first mindset. And if we want to be business first, we need to give business teams also the autonomy to have their own basically AI development teams to do it and to run it. But you cannot let it just wildly do it on its own, right? It needs to be somewhat coordinated and still aligned, so there are certain standards and guardrails put into place. And this is why the federated model, I think, makes sense, right? So where it's on the one hand side about autonomous innovation and experimentation, but on the other hand, it's about aligning with the core principles and certain standards, right? Meaning that while in the middle, you have the specific business domains who might have AI product owners and AI stewards that are actually bringing out those AI products to be used by others, right? You would have an AI review council that's cross-functional across all of the domains, actually deciding on the different standards and the different governance mechanisms that should be in place. And then you have an AI strategy board on top that's actually making the business priorities, right? Having a portfolio view on things, making the right investment strategies and prioritizations, and deciding where actually AI initiatives should go. And below it all, of course, you also have that layer of the operations and monitoring, right? So you have that infrastructure layer, you have that LLM ops, ML ops topic as well, all of the things that are happening to actually ensure that it's running and that all of the domains can do it on their own. That requires, again, an overarching layer of operations and monitoring. And because it took us a lot of time to move from central to kind of this federated model in the data space, right? Maybe we have learned from it. I hope that we all learn from it of how that works. And ideally, we can move towards a business-led federated model as soon as possible, then also in AI, to actually accelerate and scale the value of AI while keeping the guardrails in place to ensure that we have governance and compliance all across the different use cases. All right. And then it's about also talking about the collaboration part of it all, right? And that means that I think when we want to prove the value of AI, we need to actually solve actual problems, right? And the opposite of doing that, which I see all the time, is what I call pilot theater, right? So basically, someone builds some dazzling AI application. Everyone says, wow, that's really cool, cool chatbot. And then no one knows what it actually is used for. And then it kind of slowly dies in the background. And then no one knows what happens to it. And the reason is simple, right? It's really because it's not really clear what it's being used for. So the starting point should then actually be about having and identifying the right pain points to solve and not actually just doing it because it's exciting. So ideally, the following the pain cycle, which I call it, is identifying and acknowledging pain points in business processes and day-to-day individual tasks, right, of specific people that are working on things. Then based on the pain point, we need to identify the root cause. That means we clarify the requirements and we establish the urgency. And the urgency often can be then quantified, maybe even into a business case. We then define and implement the right solution for it. And by having defined and implemented then the AI solution, we increase advocacy from the team that is benefiting from the AI application again. And they then let other people share their pain points again. And the cycle continues and accelerates. And we continuously actually increase value more and more because we are actually solving problems and not, again, as said before, just creating exciting things that no one is using. And that also is how I would position it as what is actually the AI purpose of it all, right? Maybe back to the point of also co-creation, but also to the page before, right? For me, having the AI purpose is a little bit of a derivation of the ikigai for those people who know it, where you find basically your calling in your profession, right? But in my Venn diagram, it's really about four things that need to come together. The first thing is, of course, what is exciting to do. So ideally, you have that proactive approach of people that really want to try out new AI things, and they're really passionate about trying out new things. Those need to be aligned with business strategy, right? They need to somehow support the strategic objectives and the different, let's say, goals that are put in place on a yearly basis, for example. It needs to be ethical, right? And by that, I mean proactively ethical and not just reactively compliant, right? So having also there basically the key to work together. And then what is feasible to do, right? That is both from a technical point of view and also from a skill set point of view, because you need to have the right technologies in place, but also the right skill set to navigate those technologies and the right use cases to actually do it. And only by having those four coming together, this should be the purpose. Otherwise, it's doomed to fail because you're basically missing one of the points, and that is always going to become a risk. And there's a very high likelihood that someone is going to stop your project because you didn't consider one of those four different aspects. And what also is implied here is that by looking at these four aspects, you actually need to talk to the right people to make these decisions, right? So what is even exciting? What is even a business strategy? What is ethical? How do we actually assess feasibility? By then talking to the right teams, right? Like those engineers, to talk about the corporate strategy people, to talk to the legal and compliance people, to talk to data protection people, or talk to the IT folks and maybe the learning and development folks as well. That then actually comes together, and you can then define together what is possible. And then when you actually decide on the AI purpose, everyone is already on board, and you can actually move forward, and everyone has the same goal to actually reach that purpose. Cool. And then also let's talk about framing value, right? Because of course I talked about the value on for AI, which is not even achieved that much. But ideally, we have a lot of these frameworks that can help us to basically identify the value of AI, right? It's often rooted in just baseline versus basically target value, right? And what would be the difference there? How much uplift or decrease can we actually expect? And that is all good if we do it on business metrics side, right? But that is not actually moving people's hearts. It's only moving people's brains, right? Rationally, everyone knows they need to support these bigger goals and they want to help with those business metrics, but they don't necessarily get out of bed every day in the morning to actually reach those very abstract goals and metrics. They actually just want to have a nice day at their job, right? Meaning that we should also maybe consider what personally drives people to identify the reward of what actually is about AI, right? So for example, if we look at information findability being business impact and people spend less time finding the right information, right? Then maybe the middle ground is about speed to knowledge, right? But what is actually driving people is because they found the information faster, they can show up more confident in specific conversations because they actually know what they're talking about now and they have found the right context as quickly as possible in the situation they're in. So now they can actually have the conversation in the right way, and that can go a long way, right? Or it's about marketing efficiency being the business impact, right? So basically spending less time on marketing efforts, but basically making it clear there. And one part there is, for example, to have higher creative output, right? So you can create more assets through AI generation and AI support. For example, a lot more pictures for campaigns or a lot more videos for social media, right? And what actually happens for specific people is for them, it's not about taking away their job. It's about they have more time for ideation. Because if it takes less time to create actually things now, then people can spend more time thinking about the best idea possible, because relatively speaking, then they can actually then focus on the more human skill of it all, of having original ideas and less about the manual implementation of things. And lastly, for example, if you use AI for talent development, right, then of course the common ground is learning and growth. But for a few specific people, it's really about planning their careers, right? They want to know where they can move. What is the way forward? How can they grow their career? And by having AI support that goal, that is much more relevant to them than some kind of retention metric or some kind of a adoption of learning materials metrics that will be happening there. But it's much more about the personal reward that they get there. So when we actually talk about the value of AI, we cannot only use a one-size-fits-all story to explain it to every single one. We need to understand what the target audience is and what's in it for them, and then find out their personal drivers to then frame the value of AI in a way that's actually attached to what drives them personally, and thereby we can turn it from rational support into proactive enthusiasm. Cool. And when we talk about communication, it's not only about human to human communication, right? It's also about human to AI communication and AI to human communication. And nowadays, a lot of more use cases are chatbots interacting with customers instead of having call centers or like human beings now doing it, right? And that is, of course, a very efficient way to do it. But it's very quickly to go into a direction where you lose your brand voice and you lose kind of the authenticity of your own brand if you do it through only chatbots, especially those that are foundational models and pre-trained, and not make any adjustments or put any guardrails in place, right? So we need to put some kind of guardrails and principles in there. And here are a few examples how we could do it to actually ensure that even if we use LLMs in external communication, we can actually ensure that we are doing it in a way that's staying true to the voice that we have as a brand. So for example, first of all, we need to have voice principles, right? So we need to actually have core brand values and baked into the communication principles. So when we actually instruct LLMs and put guardrails in place, we should describe what actually the principles of a voice is, right? Often that is rooted in marketing communication or public relations of how we want to use certain words or not, right? But all of them can be actually put in default from all of the LLMs that are external facing and be put into as voice principles, right? Then ideally we can actually make the certain dimensions of the voice a little bit like a self-service tool, where depending on the different audiences we have or different channels we're using, we can kind of tweak the different dimensions of having a certain voice in a way, right? So for example, if we can put in place certain, like an equalizer, these different settings for warmth or playfulness or formality in there, then we can actually let the people in our organization that need to define certain communication aspects decide on their own what is the best way to talk to the customers that they know best, right? And then even the customers would feel resonated by the specific voice that a certain LLM would have with them to actually then feel more comfortable with talking to it. And lastly, we also need to monitor it, right? So also realize that we have a certain voice variety in the internal, external AI communication, and making sure that not everything exactly sounds the same, which also could be an indicator for everything sounding bland and robotic. And that is in the short to long term anyway, not really great, because it's losing the authenticity and the human touch in the communication that we have. And lastly, also, just as a suggestion, it would be nice to have these voice steward circles as well. It's basically thinking about communities of practice, right? Of people that are dealing with these topics, often very much in isolation because they are the only ones in their business teams dealing with it, to have their own little community, right? It would be a cross-functional group from UX, branding, legal, DEI, and support, customer support, to regularly then review and recalibrate the guidelines, and together then decide what is the right way to actually ensure that we maintain a certain unique voice in the space of customer agents and customer chatbots that we have in place. Then let's talk about creativity as well, right? So I mentioned before that it's about what is the difference between human thought and machine kind of AI-based creativity. And I think that what we need to consider here is that while human beings and are basically originally disruptive, right? They are the ones that actually come up with the right ideas and having actually original thought. Like, for example, Picasso actually coming up with his own writing, drawings and this own painting style of how to do it. All that actually machine learning AI does is learning from historical data and what human beings have created in the past, right? So all it does is kind of just iterating and refining things that already exist and mix and matching it, but it doesn't come up with its original thought on its own, right? That is only influenced by human beings. So if we look at this, that means that we have our roles to play when it comes to creativity, right? Meaning that we need to be the ones having the original thoughts disrupting what we need to do. Then we can collaboratively iterate with humans and AI, right? So we prompt a certain original idea into, for example, a Gen AI application, and we, with the help of Gen AI, have a faster iteration process. And then AI on its own can generate, can basically refine on its own, right? And does basically specific things to actually make it part of something else. But then it's just basically taking care of smaller things overall. And the idea is then that we as human beings need to have the original idea seized with us, and we then can work with AI to actually refine and execute it in the right way. And that also then leads to the relative time we spend on different things, right? Because when we think about typical creative jobs, then in the past, the relationship between ideation and execution was always very little ideation time and a lot of execution time, right? So let's come up quickly with a marketing campaign, and now we have like 6 months to actually create all of the assets. Like, let's shoot the pictures with the models, let's film a video, let's create copies, let's translate it into all these languages, and so on and so on and so on. And in the world of AI, of course, a lot of these tasks can be automated and even in many ways reliably automated, meaning that it shifts the relationship and the kind of split into spending less time on the execution, and we can spend more time on the ideation, right? So we don't actually have to, as human beings, spend most of the time on building the assets anymore. We can actually shift it towards shaping the ideas and framing the challenges. So in a way, practically speaking, that means if we come up with better ideas that we can put into the right prompts, for example, then we get anyway far faster to the execution of the right outputs that we need. But that means we can rely a lot more on our own creativity muscle again and have original thoughts instead of just quickly under time pressure do things. And ideally, that makes us actually more human again, with the support of AI being the executor overall. So yeah, then let's talk about the last of the 5 C's, which is conscience, right? And in a way, I think it really needs to be all rooted in what our principles of AI practice actually should be. Because we can only put as much, I mean, we can automate a lot of guardrails and we can enforce them and we can use case by use case talk about it, but it helps to have a basically universally defined organization-wide kind of principles of AI practice that can work as a reference for all of the efforts and all of the practices we do around AI. right? And that can be driven by internal practices and internal things that we define, but also by external frameworks that anyway already provide certain guardrails and certain best practices that we can use. Right. So internal practices could mean it's about brand values, right? So who do we want to be as a brand? We want to be sustainable. We want to be human-centric, et cetera, et cetera. And we make sure that these are also then reflected in the way how we deal with AI. There's probably also a code of conduct in many of the organizations of anyway, what is do's and don'ts of human behavior that we can then actually also ensure AI is not allowed to do it, because AI is only going to do it more and faster than human beings if we let it do the bad behavior that we as human beings have done in the past. Then we, of course, we also have policies, right? So we can actually enforce these guidelines, and there need to be consequences too. And we can then bake them into the AI practices too, by just putting guardrails into tools or having basically audits, of course, in place. And then we have also different principles of AI practice, right? So for example, regulations, right? The EU AI Act, for example, would be a risk classification of AI systems. Having a risk classification of AI systems is generally a good idea, because from risk classification, you can derive different safety mechanism and security mechanisms in place, right? Then we have the OECD AI principles, which is global, for example, and there it's more about human-centered values, transparency, and accountability. But then there also is the NIST AI risk framework. That's about risk across AI system life cycles. All of this can be looked up as well in detail, but we shouldn't need to reinvent the wheel here, right? Because those frameworks are really good starting points. And if you use them as reference, you can bake them into your organization's specific culturally fit way of doing it, and then define your principles of AI practice. And better do that early on, because it's always harder to clean up and realize a mistake than prevent them, right? So having strong principles always is great to actually do it in the right way. And accountability then is also one of the key problems that are there, because in the AI space, actually accountability is multi-layered, and that is what creates the biggest challenge here, right? Because we have actually three layers. It's about the data layer, it's about the AI model layer, and then we have the interface layer, right? So in the data layer, it's about who is responsible for the accuracy and validity of the data that's being fed to AI models. The model layer is then who is responsible for ensuring explainability and interpretability of the AI models. And then you have the interface layer, which is who is responsible for the good and bad human experience with the AI model, right? So in the end, it's really, sometimes we assume it's one person being responsible for all three of them, but they don't really know that they're responsible for all three of them. Sometimes it's three different people but they are not really well connected to each other. So they kind of don't understand why they can be responsible for something that they don't even know of, right? And sometimes nowadays I actually feel like it's coming closer together. But having that layered mindset and that framework, I think we need to break it down into what is not only the layers, but where do we have actually the connections between the layers, and how is that also then reflected in the accountability chain between people to make sure that they are accountable for things they actually are aware of, and that they have a decision right on to actually do it in the right way. And then lastly, we have also human risks to look out for in AI, right? Because in the way, right, we are giving a lot of historical data to AI to learn from, but not everything we as human beings have done in the past is right. And that means there's a lot of things that if we don't consider what AI is learning from, we're going to let AI learn from the bad things we did as human beings, and it's going to do it faster and more than us. And that's not really what we want, right? So those are actually aspects here that are difficult to deal with, but actually not to underestimate. So one is, of course, spotting and reducing bias, right? I think we had so many now cases in the news. I think one of the most famous one I've heard about is the Amazon one, where they did an AI model to basically pre-screen and decide on profiles for recruiting, and it ended up only prioritizing and preferring men instead of women, because they only hired men instead of women in the past, so they used that as a reference. So of course the AI model would only imitate what was there. That is a very clear bias, and that's something, of course, where they needed to shut down the whole AI model and needed to actually do it manually again to actually do it right. Disinformation, right? Of course, there are people with bad intentions. They generate AI videos and AI pictures and put them as if they were actually real, and then thereby actually making people panicking and being really confused about what's real and what's not anymore. But it can also happen with involuntarily doing disinformation, right? Typically, You don't actually apply critical thinking. You take a hallucination of an AI bot as real. You use it in a very important decision, and then it was a wrong decision to make. So you got influenced by disinformation that it's actually no one's actual fault. You just didn't know that hallucinations are something to think about, and you should probably critically evaluate what is right and wrong. But disinformation, even in an organizational context, can be fatal, right? So who knows if we can still ensure to know what is right and wrong anymore if we use AI to generate a lot of information? And how do we put in place the right rules that we can actually avoid fake information and actually rely still on real information? And lastly, of course, ecologically having conscious choices, right? Because we know AI models are great and they're really powerful, but they cost a lot of energy too. And not everything needs to have an AI to solve it too, right? Sometimes it might be just an Excel formula to actually do what you want to do. And it doesn't need to be a whole AI model prompt with an outcome that have now cost you maybe 100-fold of what it would have taken for you to do it just locally on your own computer, right? And these are things to also consider. And to the humanity part of it is that moral values that we have, right, are changing over time because humanity also evolves, right? So for example, today we don't think slavery is good anymore. We also don't think that basically, we also think that gender equality is important now. And those were things that weren't actually the place in the past. So if we only let AI imitate and not have new input into how we as human beings and humanity are evolving, then it's always be based on outdated values, right? So we need to ensure that we actually keep it up to date, and the moral compass that's being imitated by AI is actually following our own compass that is up to date, and we then need to stay up to date as human beings as well. So in closing, I just want to give you some questions at food for thought, right? Something to consider, and then might influence on how you are dealing with AI in your day-to-day, right? What values will remain stable in an unstable future, right? Which decisions must stay human no matter how advanced AI becomes? And when machines become more intelligent, are we actually becoming wiser? The future of AI lies in all of our human hands. Good luck to all of you. And before we go into Q&A, I promised you some music, right? And I actually, just to show the paradox of what we're in AI, created a parody medley of 80 songs that are about AI, just to give a little bit of fun and maybe some things you actually can resonate, that you can recognize yourself in, to basically maybe sing along. And yeah, let's do questions afterwards. Enjoy If 80 Songs Were About AI.
They don't care if they are ready. No one checks for the foundation. Everybody wants to do AI. Check your prompt before you go a little arrogant, cause I don't know LLMs, large language models. They are so in right now. I want my own. Never gonna know it all. Never gonna catch all odds. There's more AI tools than I can count. Another job bites the dust. Another job bites the dust. And another job gone. And another job gone. Another job bites the dust. Hey, AI is gonna get used to another job bites the dust. GPT is like my lover. She knows my secrets more than anyone else, and always learns from them. What a feeling, so productive. With AI tools, I have such an easy life. How will I know if this can be trusted? The only way is to fact check everything. What's law got to do with it? AI regulations
All right. And with that, we can go into Q&A.
Another
Thank you very
wonderful
much.
music video, Tiankai.
That was iconic.
Thank you.
You were so
Yes.
creative in those.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
As a musician, I put in the chat there. I'm not sure if you're familiar with him, the Dutch group Within Temptation.
All
They
right.
actually did the first AI generated music video.
Nice.
And
Okay.
only the visuals, not the vocals or the lyrics. But they
Mhm.
got such a negative backlash from the fans saying you're taking people's jobs. How dare you're stealing other people's work? How dare you do this? They actually put
Absolutely.
out an additional response video where the lead
Mhm.
singer and her husband talked about the fact that they actually employed more people to do the video using AI than they would have a normal music video.
Oh my
And
God.
people ask, how would you feel if people took your work and used it? And they said, we'd be honored. It would feel
Yeah.
like a tribute to us and everything. So I'll see if I can't post those links for everybody to easily find. Um,
Yeah.
Mixed reviews on it. Like
I
I
understand.
like it. I think it's interesting. It's one of my father's favorite groups Within Temptation. He doesn't like the video. He
I
likes a
understand.
more traditional video. So it's an interesting, I said it's not the type of thing they're going to do always,
Right.
right? And it's not necessarily a photorealistic. So it doesn't look like the band themselves. You can tell that it's AI generated. But it was a very interesting experimentation, and to be the first to put that out as a music video, not obviously the first AI generated video by any means.
Absolutely. Interesting.
But
Yeah.
I think one of the things you mentioned and cautioned against is something that I'm seeing, and I'm actually seeing it taught. Okay. And kind of where it is a badge of honor, I was actually removed from a webinar because of this.
Oh wow.
Um, there are those out there that are teaching how to use AI to do your work for you and present it as your own. So, for example, this was on a LinkedIn. They would create a prompt to create a quote viral post, create ideas for a
Mhm.
viral post, create the post, create an image of them talking as if it were them being recorded and post it at the most opportune times as them.
Oh
And
wow.
I
Okay.
and I called them out as fake. I said, these are fake, but these aren't your ideas.
Yeah.
Yes, you're creating but these aren't your ideas. These are fake posts, and I got kicked out of it for
Mhm.
that. I was actually later in a much better session where that same person was one of the instructors in the course, and they went considerably lighter on that aspect. But they
So you did make
added,
an impact. Okay. Mhm.
I hope so. They added an additional component that again I found very critical and very unethical, that you
Mhm.
could program an agentic AI to follow your contacts, and every time they made a post it would automatically make a comment in your voice, right?
Mhm.
As if
Yeah.
it were you. And there was no
Right.
way to tell that it wasn't. There was no disclaimers. I've seen a lot of AI generated content, and the ethical ones have a disclaimer. This is generated by AI, right?
Yeah. The
And
most fun I have with those, by the way, is when I make a LinkedIn post that's sarcastic, And then I see all of those AI generated comments that don't get that it's sarcasm, and they
Yes.
actually double down on the point that I was trying to counteract on. And I'm like, haha, this is funny, right? Like AI doesn't get sarcasm. This is like really
you can tell them. You
Yeah.
can tell them when you know what to look for. And I've called out posters for, saying, I've put in, I can tell this is an AI post. This isn't you posting, right? And I know the people that are doing this. And I just, we all know the infographics we see. It's a given those are AI generated, right? But but I know, because I know the people, they're generated by their ideas. It's their ideas that they're putting in to generate those. That's a totally understandable, ethical, and viable usage, enhancing your that you mentioned, enhancing your productivity. So you don't have to spend all the time. We could spend 10 hours creating a PowerPoint deck, right?
Absolutely.
When we could just as easily do a prompt that's going to do it in 10 minutes, and then we can spend another 20 minutes maybe making our own personal tweaks to it and stuff, and still come out with something that's representative of us and our ideas.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's the fine line we're threading right now, because if you look on LinkedIn, more and more of it's becoming just AI generated, and you can spot those.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, thank you. I know we have a lot of cameras on, and I'm sure a lot of people have questions. So I don't know who to choose first. Whoever
Maybe
wants
we
to
just put
go.
some, Debs, let's put some hands up, and then let's go
Shall
with
we
the
do
hands up,
book
and then we
prize
can go with that.
first, and then?
Yeah. No,
Right,
sorry.
so-
If people have a question, Debs, if people have a question, they can put their hands up.
If people have a question, sure.
Yeah. Are there anybody else? Adam, 2 minutes on your side, and then we can get someone else to. Yes, Esty.
Esty, please.
I'm actually wondering, I really love the humanizing AI part. Like, I feel like humanizing AI, humanizing data. I'm an engineer, so engineering everything with that. And I'm wondering if you think it's going to be easier to do in smaller companies versus doing large corporations, or if that's almost, not a factor.
Yeah, I mean, I that's a really good question. I think it definitely will be easier to do in small companies, but they might not prioritize it as much in smaller companies simply because it's not top of mind for them yet. It's like the world for smaller companies is not as big yet that they need to consider what human-centric means, because they can be human-centric by default still. Like, every single person can talk to every single person still in the organization, for example. They have enough, not too many customers, so they can still personally talk to every customer. So why even bother, right? It's like super human-centric in the most original way, right? So I think it needs to, at some point with growth, you reach a certain point where you cannot handle all of it through human and manual labor anymore. And then you finally consider, okay, how do we maintain this certain human centricity in it all? And this is when you kind of go over that threshold, right? I don't really have a number for the threshold, but I feel like with growth, you need to consider human centricity more and more. Otherwise, you lose that human centricity, right? Like, people all become anonymous, colleagues don't know each other anymore, customers just become records that are in a table and not actual human beings anymore. It's so easy to lose that centricity again. So it's rather about, with scaling, how can you scale humanity too, right? That is kind of the idea.
Cool, thanks.
Yeah, the thing that I found very interesting, we had a really nice presentation from Migros Bank in Switzerland, and they were very interesting because they were talking about the massive disparity between the really rich in Switzerland and then the normals.
Right.
And what they were saying is that they created a bank that didn't charge any fees for banking, because they were finding some of the population couldn't afford the banking. Now, everything they did was about being efficient, optimal, working correctly, and reducing what they could do with people. Now, what was interesting is they brought on a lot of LLM chatbots and things like that. And they had an approach which I really liked. And basically, they said for every person we take and we save the call center from, they will come in, they will become data stewards that are used to validate that there's no toxicity in the responses, and so they
Right.
haven't lost anybody. So they've transitioned the people from the work that chatbots and AI can do, and they've transitioned them to be the quality and vetting and humans in the loop. So they had a really nice approach of tackling this challenge that they faced. But I do suppose, and to your question, ST, when you get some people like PwC saying they're firing 11,000 people, they've got so many people that are there, and how do they redeploy those? That's a different game.
And then also a
Absolutely.
human type of question, and like the humanizing part of, you know, firing 11,000 people and the influence that that has on a lot of people.
Yeah, it's massive.
Absolutely. Yeah, I mean, there's also an interesting other part that is there, which is if you are firing 11,000 people, you probably are planning to replace them with AI applications, right? AI agents, whatever you want to call them. But AI agents only works best if they have the best context, right? And the best context are the people that were fired, right? So I doubt that those 11,000 people were all training AI models before they left, right? It was probably very sudden, and they didn't even know they were going to be fired, so they all suddenly didn't have a job. So where does the context even still come from, right? Who's going to now oversee those AI agents doing the job as qualitatively good as the people do it, even doubting technically that it's even possible to do it as good as human beings? Well, how does it work, right? I feel like with all of those firings, there was clearly some kind of profitability challenge, most likely, and they needed to find a scapegoat to anyway fire people. And now they used AI a lot for these conversations. And then it's always easier to rehire a smaller bunch of people if they really critically need them than to fire them in batches, right? So rather just let it all go at once and I'll do it back. But that's really bad because that puts AI also in a really bad light now, right? Because now everyone's scared of AI transformations because of those news that everyone's hearing about thousands of people being fired all the time. So it's a really tricky environment we're in right now, where AI is being communicated as the reason for everything that's happening in all of these situations.
Ronald.
All right. Yeah, thanks for that. So my question is more around the data layer components that you mentioned in your discussion. So within the South African iGaming market, all right, relating to gambling and betting in South Africa, there are three different, should I say, it's going to be actually now four different gambling boards, obviously within the respective provinces controlled in the country. All right. Now, with the AI use of tools that is going to be managing, or should I say, processing the financial taxation data that is being controlled in the respective iGaming company markets, do you think it's actually feasible for the accountants to be accountants or data stewards in those particular regards? Because if you're going to be utilizing AI tools, especially within the data function layer, especially when the data is being controlled, processed, especially from a financial perspective and taxation perspective, do you think that those accountants should still be regarded as accountants, or rather data stewards controlling the actual information that's being processed within those respective regulations?
Very good question. I mean, I don't know how the tax process works in South Africa, first of all, right? And I don't know how much human complexity is in all of it, right? But if I would say there are very clear rules about how tax rates work and how the tax payment is supposed to process and everything, then I can imagine the processing of tax declarations and income statements and so on being highly automated, right? That is possible. I think, as in my human in the loop example, I would probably automate a big part of it. but put in certain thresholds in that if they are being surpassed, then a human being needs to still review what's going on, right? So, for example, if the tax amount is far higher than all of the rest in average, or far lower than all of the rest, then something is not right, right? So just to have that check and see what's going on and have that human action still. Meaning, to your point, right? Yes, I think accountants could potentially move away a lot from those manual preparing statements and processing statements task, but they need to become the new human in the loop when certain situations need to require a human judgment still over it. But they also need to be maybe the ones that are managing those agents or applications in the future, right? Because they are then the ones that say, okay, now we need to implement a new rule into the agent, a new process step, because let's say the government now wants an additional step to be checked and a new field in the declaration needs to be put in. Let's make this part of the priority of the development of that AI agent to also include that step. In the meantime, let me do it manually and help to do it in a certain way to let AI learn from it, etc., etc. So, right. So I think it will evolve. It will not be the pure accountant role that it was before. But I would not see it actually as a replacement again, right? It would rather be the accountant is now supported by AI and the accountant is better at his job. That it would be, or their job about what to do. That is how I would frame it.
All right. Yeah.
And
Thanks.
I think it's also important to recognize that the data steward isn't the SME, right? That data steward should be coming from business and they should understand it. But now we're asking them to be able to work with the data and work with the agents. So we shouldn't run that person down in terms of, oh, you're just a data steward. No, you're a business SME that knows how to work with data and knows how to work with AI.
100%. Yeah. Because I think that's where especially in the iGaming, should I say, industry, it's actually shifting towards now, because especially understanding the Western Cape gambling board regulators, the Gauteng gambling board, as well as the KwaZulu-Natal as well. It's actually quite interesting to understand how do the accountants now, should I say, become actually the SMEs of that actual data that they're processing, especially for taxation purposes. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Thanks.
Christy.
Wonderful presentation. Thank you so very much. I am in the process of editing my data literacy course. And so I work in higher education. I work at a liberal arts institution. And so we value academic freedom, but we also respect ethics and academic integrity. So I'm kind of looking at, we're adding AI literacy into the data literacy program, right? So we want people to be aware that AI is there, that it can be used. I also sit on a build team, which is, finding use cases and how can we create use cases that are beneficial for the institution, like creating LLMs to help our Title IX director search through thousands and thousands of pages of policies and laws and so forth to find things much easier than trying to do a PDF search. As we all know, PDF search is not the greatest. But my question is how do we continue to prioritize human centeredness in AI along the lines of higher education, but still allowing that academic freedom?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I mean, I think
I
don't know if
questions.
Yeah, that's great to know. I mean, I'm not disappointed. They're very cool. No, what I'm thinking is I don't know if any of you read the book Co-Intelligence from Ethan Mollick. That's also on the book of AI, right? But he talks about 3 different roles and relationships that human beings have to AI, and one of them actually was about AI as a teacher. Right. And he basically goes deeper into that topic. What does actually mean? Because you could let AI teach you things, right? Because it has access to all of the knowledge and it can even create curriculums, everything. And he brought up the example of calculators, right? That before calculators, people were using abacus or like manual hands to make calculations. And then when the calculator came, it was as controversial as AI nowadays is, as in, will we still learn how to even calculate stuff in our heads if we have calculators? Where does it go from here, right? And I think we should also consider that as an example of how we deal with AI, right? Where basically we need to still know how things work, both the AI technology itself, but also the subject matter that we are working in with AI together and that means also we need to always be in the driver's seat, right? We cannot let AI get away with things where we cannot even judge anymore if it's right or wrong, and we don't even understand anymore what it means. We need to always be able to be one step ahead. And even if AI is faster and can scale more than we as human beings can ever do, we still need to be able to understand the output of it all. And that is, I think, is the key, right? If we all of a sudden let it generate stuff that we don't even understand ourselves anymore, it's much more risky to have something that is incorrect and maybe even risky to be used, because it might lead to very bad decisions that are bad for society or for human life, right? So I think that is where I would also see academic freedom being part of it, right? Freedom means knowing what you're doing and from there building on it, right? And it doesn't mean that you can just do whatever you want and even do wrong things because AI told you so. You need to be the one driving that freedom, not using AI to drive that freedom. And that is maybe the balance that I would at least see there. And I would maybe root it that in subject matter expertise and literacy to be able to do that. If that makes sense, I hope.
And yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense. I'm also the data governance manager, so I feel I can also implement that in with the data governance program. And so that's one of the things I'm doing. We're adding AI governance as part of data governance, but I mean, it's really, we've always been doing it, right? It's not that we're not, that we're doing some new thing with the data of the AI, but making sure that we're not being as prescriptive to silence academic freedom, but also making sure that we're being safe and teaching people what are the ethics, what are the what are the problems that AI can have that could be impactful within your classroom or within your being just a student, right? Looking at what a student could possibly do with AI and how that impacts them, both negatively and positively. So thank you.
Yeah, sure.
Adam. And then I think we should vote, otherwise people will be leaving the platform.
lot to unpack. Great examples, Tiankai. The whole point of human in the loop. So many failures that I've seen and lawsuits that are ongoing and more every day are the result of human being out of the loop. AI decisioning without human review. There's a lot around healthcare. A lot, as Christy mentioned, a lot of things in academia now. It's much more challenging now to be able to detect papers that are written by AI than it was when AI systems were first introduced. I know from my college days, my papers would be questioned today. I remember one quick assignment I had. It was supposed to be 4 pages, double spaced. I ended up doing 16 pages, single spaced, double sided for my term paper. And which was far beyond anybody else. And that's just my nature as you're a composer, I'm a writer. So similar aspects there. Just so much like I say, edge of ethical usage. The same processes can be used ethically and they can be used unethically as well. And that's kind of where the line has to be drawn.
Absolutely.
And one example, I did post that recent article about Deloitte being fined for submitting an AI generated paper. Nobody ever even reviewed it. It was just AI generated and submitted to the company with errors in it.
Oh my God.
Yes. with errors in it. And that's how it was detected as being AI, because there were errors in it and they were questioned on it. So there's a lot of that that happening.
Yeah. Let's hope we can do it right, and we have the right momentum to now turn it around again, right? And make it more human in the loop again.
Hopefully so. The big AI influencers like yourself and others getting these organizations to understand that AI is not the be all and end all. It is just a tool for enhancement and enrichment and increased productivity, not a replacement for humans.
Absolutely.
Great. Debbie, I think we need to do it before too many people drop off.
Let's do the book prize. Okay, so Tiankai, could you think of a number between 1 and 15? Everyone can raise their hands now if you want to compete to win the book.
You need to close your eyes, Tiankai, otherwise you're going to see it.
Yeah. You tell me when I should say the number.
Okay, it's happening. It's happening. I'm waiting for 2 more people. I don't know if they are raising their hands. So between 1 and 13, you can say your number.
I choose
Oh, wait, 1
11.
and 14. 11. 11 is Charlotte. Congratulations, Charlotte.
Fantastic.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
Done. Thank you so much, Charlotte. If you can drop your email in the chat and I'll make sure that you'll receive it. And yeah, I know from behalf of all of us, we thoroughly enjoyed this webinar, and I'm sure we could talk another hour about this. So really a huge thank you to you. And it was an absolute pleasure to host you. Thank you so much.
Yeah,
your sessions are always great, Tiankai.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you very much.
Awesome.
Tiankai.
Talk to you very soon. Bye-bye.
Thank you, guys.
Cheers,
Have a good
everybody.
evening.
Take
All right,
care,
then.
everyone.
Take it easy.
Bye.
Cheers.
Thank
Bye-bye.
you. Bye.
AG, we're walking.